boy, no doubt about it. It's a Monday, huh? All right. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find us live on the web at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can also catch us, and every program that we do is videotaped and shot up and posted up on YouTube, where you can share them. Key operative word there, folks, was share them. And you can find that site by going to youtube.com/America's Voice Now. We mean what we say when we say we are America's voice, because I think we speak for the mass of Americans who aren't heard. You know, we're not being listened to by our representatives. The media doesn't represent our views. In fact, they do everything they can to either block you from having that view or to quash them when you try to speak out. We also have a vast amount of Americans who are so angry at this point about what's being done to us and in our government that no one knows about. I mean, why is it that we don't have a voice? That is exactly what the problem is, folks. We don't have a voice. No one in Congress could care less. In fact, they don't want anyone to know you exist, both the Republicans and the Democrats. You know, I look at all over the weekend, I keep hearing about CPAC, and all of this nonsense about it. Let me tell you something. They have these straw polls, you know, and for the record, Rand Paul won it, you know. Cruz came in, I think, second or third, I don't know. Chris Christie, I think, came in last. Thank goodness for that, right? Because that guy is like, if you look at Chris Christie and you think to yourself, that's a conservative, you and I have nothing further to talk about. But the truth is, none of them represent us. None of them represent the reality of where we are in our society. Ted Cruz, who I like, but I also have serious misgivings about, and I'll tell you why. He comes from a career in law enforcement and as a prosecutor. And that tells me that his thinking is tainted. You know, when you hear about people who, as an example, are long-term abusers of a drug, let's say methamphetamine, or when you hear about people who are on antidepressants for a very, very long time, the clinical, and this is epidemiological evidence, this isn't just me talking, the clinical evidence suggests that it rewires the brain in a permanent way. In other words, your synapse is reconnected in ways that were not natural. And I would submit to you that working in government for all of your life and being a government careerist does the same thing. It rewires your thinking into a manner that is not in connection with reality. You earn far more than most people out in the public or in the private arena of business. I mean, we've seen numerous studies that show that people who work for government consistently earn far more money working for the public, quote unquote, than do their counterparts in private corporations and industry. Not to mention the bennies and the pensions and all the stuff that you don't get anymore in the corporate world. And it rewires your thinking because you only see the world through government-colored glasses. And you begin to believe that it's all up to you and that your thinking, however skewed or twisted or schizophrenic that may have become over the years, is that matters, that you have the power. It's the same power that a police officer feels when he puts on that uniform, when a military figure feels when he puts on that uniform. It changes that person's mentality. It changes their approach. It changes their thinking. It changes their view of the world around them. And don't tell me that being a careerist in the political arena or a careerist in government, period, does not change your thinking. It does. And it makes you tone deaf to the reality of the other 300 million of us who are here. You've got 315 million people in the nation. 15 million of them are completely ensconced in the bubble of government. You know, it shouldn't come as a surprise to you. I don't know why it is. And I don't mean you personally, but I don't know why it's a surprise to the nation that we are surrounded by people who have a vested interest in remaining a tick attached to the blood supply. The House approves this bill to stop Obama's war on coal. Now, look, for the record, I'm just going to draw this simple analogy for you. But 67% of all of our electricity generated by power plants comes, or all of the electricity supply in the United States, I should say, 67% comes from a combination of coal and fossil products, right? Whether that be natural gas or oil, but very few plants burn oil. There's quite a few now who are migrating to natural gas, but the vast majority use coal. 6%, and that's the average standard that's used in most arenas, which means it may well be inflated because everybody's for it and nobody's against it. But let's just use their number. 6% is generated by alternative energy sources, and that includes a combination of solar and wind. Now, and other forms, by the way. Solar is wonderful, but it's expensive, it's unreliable, and here's the problem with all energy. I don't care who makes it. You can't store it. There's no way to store energy. So it has to be produced on demand. And, well, solar has a problem because we experience 12 hours of no sunlight. And that's just nature's way. Wind is a problem because, well, there's some places where it just doesn't blow all the time. And even in those places where it doesn't consistently produce enough power. So when we have a primary fuel source, which would be coal, that produces the vast majority of the electric supply in the United States of America, how can we look at that and say, we're going to end that, but we don't have something to take its place? I mean, it's not like electricity is a luxury for us. I want you to spend 2 seconds and think about all the things that you touch so far this morning that have required electricity. Let's see, your coffee or your coffee pot, the computer or the audio device you're listening to this on, the lights that are in your home. I mean, there's just so many things. We live on electricity, and we don't have an alternative to coal. So I analogize this to the kid who says, you know, I really hate my job. I have just had enough. My boss, he's mean. He makes me show up 5 minutes before I'm supposed to. How dare he? And when I'm there, he actually wants me to work. And I would suggest that there are those individuals who will look at their situation with lack of experience and say, that's it, I've had enough, I'm quitting. And they will, without another job in hand. And then a month or two later, as they are out of money and their final paycheck has come through and been spent, they begin to complain about how unfair it is that they don't have a job. Well, individuals with good logical reasoning skills and critical thinking skills would say, I really hate my job. So I'm going to take this opportunity before I leave to find an alternative position that will be more satisfactory or more personally fulfilling or pay better or whatever the reasons are. And then they will go out and seek another job. When they have found one, they will notify their old boss and say, you know, boss, I appreciate the opportunity you've given me here, but I found another job that will give me a little bit more personal satisfaction, a little bit more money, whatever the case may be, and they move on. That's what intelligent, well-reasoned, articulate individuals do. We, as a nation, need to look at that same analogy and say, we will not give up coal until we have found an alternative source that betters it. We will not believe a lot of falsified, paid-for scientific opinions that are unrepeatable, not peer-reviewable, that expose all of the science that's been done as a fraud. We need to be able to say, we're not going to rely on anything other than that which we know will be consistently available to us. When we have an alternative, and it has proven itself, and it is not only cost effective, but functional, then and only then can we cease using coal. The truth is that there's really no reason to stop using coal, especially in the United States. I mean, I'm not arguing that we're not a polluter. We are. But that doesn't mean that we unilaterally should stop using coal while China's building them as fast as they can, coal plants. Did you know that? Did you know that almost every other nation in the world is building coal plants as fast as they can? We, on the other hand, are seeking to destroy our own infrastructure for pseudoscience. Pseudoscience because we still don't have any empirical evidence that climate change exists and or that we're responsible for it. Even if it does exist, there's no empirical proof that we're the ones who are responsible for it, and that changing anything about the coal-burning industry to create electricity will have an impact on that. And I would suggest to you that it makes absolutely no sense to change our entire nation. We're not talking about 1/6 of the economy here, folks. We're talking about 60% of the economy. Because when you cut electricity or you triple the rate, you put everyone out of business. You take the homeowner and you make them have to make a choice now between a massive electric bill and food or medicine or school or education or gas to get to work to pay the electric bill. Obama has said to us a long time ago, before he ever ran, under my plan, electricity prices will necessarily skyrocket. And like many, many, many other statements that he's made that come to pass. Now, everyone at the time said, well, that's not what he really means. Why don't you take this guy as a man of his word when it comes to those types of statements? He told you what his intention was. And he's now achieved it. The House has approved this bill to block the climate plan. The problem, of course, and by the way, for the record, this thing passed with 10 Democrats voting on behalf of the bill. They wanted it. There were 3 Republicans who opposed it. These 3 were, well, whatever. I mean, I'm just so tired of pointing out treason. I don't get it. I mean, how can anybody be against it? ABC News came out and says, the bill targets Obama's proposal for the Environmental Protection Agency to set the first national limits on heat-trapping carbon pollution from future power plants. It's part of the GOP's election year strategy to fight back against what Republicans call a war on coal by the Obama administration. Well, it's not just the Obama administration's war on coal. It's the environmental movement's war on coal. He happens to be their greatest weapon, the biggest bat they own. And to be honest with you, it's not the GOP's election year strategy. This should be a pocket strategy for every American. We can't afford it. In a bad economy with no jobs, and frankly, a bad economy with a future that happens to go out as far as the eye can see, the last thing we should be doing is tacking on higher costs to the high cost of being poor for the vast majority of America. And I do mean the vast majority. 50% of the country can't afford their bills now. How do I know that? Because 50% of the country is on food stamps. You only get on food stamps when you're not making enough to make the ends meet, right? So how much more empirical proof do we need? 50% of the country is making a choice between electricity and food. And we're subsidizing the food. So what do you think is going to happen when the electric bill goes up? You don't even need a calculator. Just do the math in your head. It's that easy. See, all of this has nothing to do, and again, it's proof that you are meaningless in the overall scheme of things. You're just, you're just beans in a silo. So many billions of us. We're all just beans in the silo. And every once in a while, one or two goes bad and they toss it out. No big deal. No harm done. Problem is that these beans all have lives and sentience, and we think, or at least most of us do. But that's not of importance to these people. The idea of Obama is to bankrupt the coal industry. He's told us so. In fact, in 2008, when he was on his campaign, he told the San Francisco Chronicle, he said, if somebody wants to build a coal-fired power plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them. Now, the question is, why would we, as a logical, intelligent organism with the ability to reason, which is the only thing that separates us from the animals, and the only thing that separates us from the flora and fauna of the planet, why would we allow this to happen? Why would we allow one person to commit national suicide and on behalf of all of us? See, that's the problem. You got 15 million people all buried into government up to their necks. And they're intent on committing national suicide. Not because they're depressed, because they've got some cockamamie ideal, like those people who committed suicide because they thought they were going to go to a star or some stupid nonsense. It's all fantasy. Heaven's Gate, that was the name of those knuckleheads. And these idiots who want to live in a fantasy land, who believe that you can inhale unicorn flatulence and survive on it, are intent on committing national suicide. The only problem is we're chained to them. So when they go over the edge of the bridge, they start hauling us along. They don't really care whether or not you agree or desire to die, as long as they achieve their goal. We are at a point, ladies and gentlemen, where the EPA is used as a bludgeon against this nation. If Congress had any intelligence, had any true interest in protecting you, the smallest minority, the first thing they would do is freeze the EPA and everything they do. Lock them down tight. No more. They're going out there and saying, well, if you have a wood stove, you're polluting the atmosphere, and they passed new regulations on wood stoves. Have you seen them? Do you realize that the flyover country, that would be where all of us live, that the amount of homes that are heated by wood, or at least subsidized by wood, because we can't afford the doggone electric bill, meanwhile, you have people in the EPA who are using secret email accounts, all this dirt going on. You got Obama using them in the IRS as weapons of mass destruction against the nation which he's sworn an oath to protect and uphold. I cannot think of another example that better typifies treason than the